But I know in your book, you start your book off with the prologue of a story about a friend asking to come over.
Yeah.
And before he showed up, you looked around, checking the fridge for smells, searching to see if things were seemed normal. You ended up not letting him in.
Yeah.
You say in your book, you said, I've come to believe that the narrative that my ethnicity and cultural details would turn people away. At a young age, I learned to believe my Korean normal was embarrassing, a barrier to belonging and the enemy of my deepest longings. You're sharing your story. You sharing your story will bring freedom to a lot of people because a lot of people think this,
Mm,
but they would not articulate it.
mm,
There's shame or embarrassment with coming from that. Just kind of
yeah.
like what I said about my name.
Yeah.
What are your hopes that you have for this book, as maybe other little girls
Yeah.
are reading this that identify as you,
Yeah.
like
I
you.
mean, I think my deepest hope is that readers who come across it will feel seen, will know that they're not alone. Because I think, as you said, the shame that I think we feel sometimes, or that we're taught to feel, about who we are, and then the shame that we feel for feeling those things, because that's kind of wrapped,
Yeah.
you know, can really isolate us. And I think there's a lot more stories out there now that help. But that's my deepest hope, is that people will feel seen and not alone, because I do think that gives a doorway to freedom and to, feeling like your story can be liberated. And I also just hope that, even though I'm writing really specifically about me, I know some
Mhm.
people will have really similar experiences, but I hope that being really specific will help people to be specific about themselves, and just take a look within, um, and be able to see their own values, and or their own distinctions with value, I should say, and attention, like give attention to those things.
Right. And we take a lot of our really our self-esteem, our confidence, and a lot of times our racial identity from our
Yeah.
mom. And I've heard Kathy Kong, she has stated before about how her mom came over um, from Korea with all these beautiful, like Korean outfits. And
Mm,
she was saying that they were put in this trunk and she stored them away because she wanted to fit in, and wearing those beautiful garments would not allow her to fit in,
yeah.
and so there's this assimilation process that her mom went through, sometimes in order to thrive
Yeah.
or survive. It's like a lot of times survival. And so sometimes you don't teach the language to the next generation because you don't want them to be picked on or
Yeah.
harassed. What was that like with your mom? Like you
Yeah.
said, your mom is Korean American and your father is white. So what was that like? How did your mom like infuse who you are in you, or if she
Yeah.
did?
Yeah. I would say that, so for her and her own experience, when she first came over to the States, it was actually with her first marriage. And that was a very difficult experience. Her first time in the US was very, just really difficult. She did not know any other Koreans. So, I mean, almost immediately when she set foot here, it was like there was nowhere for her to express herself. She learned English, from watching TV. And so by the time I was born, I think that all of that was still very fresh, and I think she did not want me to struggle. And so whether she realized it or not, I mean, she'll say now, I tried to teach you Korean, but you didn't listen. um, but I remember as a kid, I think she was still learning English, and she was also wanting me to have everything that she felt like she couldn't have. And
Mhm.
so, that was never articulated, but it was very felt. And so my experience was that at home, everything was very Korean. the way that she moved, the way that she nurtured me with food or cared for me, it was all very Korean. Like even bath time, it was very typical Korean where we had like the nylon washcloths and she scrubbed my back
Mm,
and we bathed together. And there's a story in the book about how when I realized this wasn't typical for my non-Korean friends, and just how shocking it was for me. But, and then I would step out the door, and I feel like she was probably of my parents, like the louder one or the one, I mean, culturally and as the mother, I think.
yeah.
I think what you said was really right on. Like it just was how our home was run.
Hmm.
So even if the language wasn't there, it was very Korean, like down to the core. But then when I would step outside, it was a whole nother world. And so I was constantly, without even thinking about it, stepping out and like, okay, I put that away. So then the thought of having someone come into that was like, oh, like this is a
Yeah.
whole nother side of me that I don't bring with me anywhere.
Mm,
Or I try not to at least.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I really think that was true for her. I think for her it was survival. Um, and just not wanting me to go through any of the pain that she went through.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that
Yeah.
because I know those are tender
Yeah.
parts of you. And so thanks for sharing that. And hopefully, those that are listening, this may resonate with you. I know a lot of times when I'm talking to people who are actually identify as biracial, we were just in a actually another school.
Oh,
And one of our team members who is biracial, because of the kids noticed that they had a lot of questions like how do you
mm,
navigate both sides of your family,
yeah.
especially in the tension of the culture with maybe home is a safe space with your parents, but maybe when you're visiting grandparents or aunts or uncles or cousins, it's not so much as a safe space, and trying
Yeah.
to navigate that because you love all the parts of you.
Right.
And so they were just really wanting to know, like, how do you navigate that? Like, how do you navigate being this particular person is black and white? They were saying, how are you navigating this? And so that's important, where you were saying like at home was very much so Korean, but when you stepped out the door, it was like you put on a mask
Yeah.
almost. This is what I mean. I can relate to that in a
Mm,
sense because as an African American, we've always had to do that,
mm,
for people in many ways. So I totally understand exactly what you mean, where, maybe we change our accent,
yeah.
or maybe we articulate things a certain way, or maybe, many of us change our names,
Yeah.
um, because of maybe our names sound more ethnic or as a name that's joked about or
Mm,
things like that. So I totally understand. You also feel you say a lot about you didn't feel completely Korean either. That you have always been caught between two worlds, American and Korean, faith and doubt, devotion, and fierce independence. Could you share a little bit more about what you were feeling unfit as a Korean, but somehow too Korean in some other places?
yeah. Um, I mean, I think the two Korean is kind of like what we talked about already. And I'm thinking more when we moved to Indiana, that was kind of the shocker where I was in a space for the first time that was predominantly white, where I could count the number of Asians, not just in my grade, but in the entire school on one hand. And I looked for them, like, just as like
Right.
without even thinking about it. And so I think that was just a really formative time for me, moving here in high school. And so during that time, I think I felt too Korean. My first day of school, I had people coming up to me, and this kind of sums it all up, saying, "Are you the new Chinese girl? Um, are you Hawaiian? Are you Mexican?" And that's partially because by being biracial, they couldn't quite tell because I looked Asian but didn't fit the stereotype that they had known,
Right.
which was very slim
Yeah.
and inaccurate. Um, but just feeling like, gosh, like people have the audacity to come up to
Yeah.
me and just ask
Right.
me these questions and expect me to
Yeah.
answer them. So there was that. But then on the flip side, when I was younger and we lived in Japan, the first things I learned to say in Japanese was, watashi wa American jin desu. I'm American. And watashi wa Kankokujin. I would say I was Korean, because they would be confused about
Mm.
when I said I was American. They're like, what? Because we expect
Yeah.
someone different with blonde hair and blue eyes, and then I
Yeah.
would say I'm Korean, and then it was even more confusing. So then the first time we went to Korea one summer, our first summer there, we were actually looking for my mom's family because she had lost contact with her family and lost family members because of the Korean War.
Mhm.
And so we're looking for her family. And I had just experiences all over the place where, and this is also in the book, but where, these high school kids bit on my sister and I. And I had no idea why. And then later my mom had to explain to me it's because your dad is white and they don't like that you are mixed and that you're here. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm thinking we're going home to Korea, and
Wow.
feeling like, oh, I didn't know there were people here that just, hate and kind of have blame, because of what had happened during the war. So, and I couldn't understand that as a child. But
Mhm.
now, having more context, it's like, oh, that's a really complicated feeling.
Yeah.
Like, not,
Yes.
anyway, so there was that. And then also feeling like, oh, they don't see you as Korean. They see you as American. You're my American daughter, and you are not Korean. And so
Yeah.
it was just shocking, I think. And then in some Korean American communities, my mom would try to bring us into, my sister and I, and just feeling very much like, oh, we're not the same. There's
Mm.
something different here. We can't speak. I don't know what they're talking about. So,
Right.
yeah, just kind of being shocked by that and wondering, oh, so I don't belong there, but then I don't really belong here. So
Right. Right.
nowhere,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And those, I know people who are listening, many of you can identify with that.